Genovese soldier Joe Valachi was convicted in 1959 and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Valachi's motivations for becoming a government informant had been the subject of some debate. Valachi claimed to be testifying as a public service and to expose a powerful criminal organization that he had blamed for ruining his life. But it is possible he was hoping for government protection as a part of a plea bargain in which he was sentenced to life imprisonment instead of the chair for a 1962 hit. While serving his sentence for trafficking, Valachi came to fear that Genovese, also serving a sentence on the same charge, had ordered his demise. On June 22, 1962, using a pipe left near some construction work, Valachi eliminated an inmate whom he had mistaken for Joseph D. Palermo, a mafia member he believed had been contracted to take him out. After time with FBI handlers, Valachi came forward with the story of Genovese giving him a kiss on the cheek, which he took as a, quote, kiss of death. A $100,000 bounty for Valachi's head had been placed by Genovese. Soon after, Valachi decided to cooperate with the U.S. Justice Department. On October 1963, he testified before Arkansas Senator John McClellan's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations of the U.S. Senate Committee on Government Operations, known as the Valachi hearings, stating that Italian-American Mafia actually existed. This was the first time a member had acknowledged its existence in public. Valachi's testimony was the first major violation of omerta, breaking his blood oath. He is credited with popularization of the term Cosa Nostra. Although Valachi's disclosure never led directly to the prosecution of any mafia leaders, he provided many details of the history of the mafia, operations, and rituals. He aided in the solution of several unsolved killings and named many members and the major crime families. The trial exposed American organized crime to the world through Valachi's televised testimony. After Genovese was sent to prison in 1959, the family leadership secretly established a ruling panel to run the family in his absence. This first panel included acting boss Tommy Ryan Eboli, underboss Gerardo Cattina, and Cattina's protege Philip Benny Squint Lombardo. After Genovese died in 1969, Lombardo was named his successor. However, the family appointed a series of front bosses to masquerade as official family boss. The aim of these deceptions was to protect Lombardo by confusing law enforcement as to who was the true leader of the family. In the late 1960s, Gambino lent $4 million to Eboli for a narcotics scheme in an attempt to gain control of the Genovese family. When Eboli failed to pay back his debt, Gambino, with the commission approval, had him hit in 1972. After Eboli's demise, Genovese capo and Gambino ally Frank Thierry was appointed as the new front boss. In reality, the Genovese family created a new ruling panel to run the organization. This second panel consisted of Cattina, Lombardo, and Big Mike Miranda. In 1981, Thierry became the first mafia boss to be convicted under the new RICO Act and died in prison later that year. After Thierry's imprisonment, the family reshuffled its leadership. The capo of the Manhattan faction, Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, became the new front boss. Lombardo, the de facto boss of the family, soon retired, and Giganti, their turgoman on the failed Costello hit, took actual control of the family. In 1985, New York State Attorney General Rudolph Giuliani set his sights on taking down the Mafia Commission through wiretaps, cooperating witnesses, and surveillance cameras. In 1985, Salerno was convicted in the Mafia Commission trial and sentenced to 100 years in federal prison. In 1986, shortly after Salerno's conviction, his longtime right-hand man, Vincent the Fish Caffaro, turned informant and told the FBI that Salerno had been the front boss for Giganti. Caffaro also revealed that Genovese family had been keeping up the ruse since 1969. After the 1980 hit of Philadelphia boss Angelo Gentildon Bruno, Giganti and Lombardo began manipulating the rival factions in the war-torn Philadelphia family. They finally gave their support to Philadelphia mobster Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo, who in return gave the Genovese mobsters permission to operate in Atlantic City in 1982. Giganti built a vast network of bookmarking and loan sharking rings, and from the extortion of garbage, shipping, trucking, and construction companies seeking labor peace or contracts from carpenters, teamsters, and laborers' unions, including those at the Javits Center, as well as protection payoffs from merchants at the Fulton Fish Market. Giganti also had influence in the feats of San Gennaro in Little Italy, running illegal gambling operations, extorting payoffs from vendors, and pocketing thousands of dollars donated to a neighborhood church, until a crackdown in 1995 by New York City officials. During Giganti's tenure as boss of the Genovese family, after the imprisonment of John Gotti in 1992, Giganti came to be known as the figurehead Capo di tutti capi, the boss of all bosses, despite the position being abolished since 1931 with the hit on Salvatore Maranzano. Giganti was reclusive and almost impossible to capture on wiretaps, speaking softly, eschewing the phone, and even at times whistling into the receiver. He almost never left his home unoccupied because he knew FBI agents would sneak in and plant a bug. Genovese members were not allowed to mention Giganti's name in conversations or phone calls. When they had to mention him, members would point to their chins or make a letter C with their fingers. On May 30th, 1990, Giganti was indicted along with other members of 4 of the 5 families for conspiring to rig bids and extort payoffs from contractors on multi-million-dollar contracts with New York City Housing Authority to install windows. Giganti attended his arraignment in pajamas and a bathrobe, and due to his defense stating that he was mentally ill and physically impaired, legal battles ensued for 7 years over his competence to stand trial. In June 1993, Giganti was indicted again, charged with sanctioning the hits on 6 mobsters and conspiring to take out 3 others, including John Gotti. At sanity hearings in March 1996, Sammy the Bull Gravano, former underboss of the Gambino family, who became a cooperating witness in 1991, and Alphonse Little Al Diarco, former acting boss of the Lucchese family, testified that Giganti was lucid at top-level mafia meetings, and that he had told other gangsters that his eccentric behavior was a pretense. Giganti's lawyers presented testimony reports from psychiatrists stating that, from 1969 to 1995, Giganti had been confined 28 times in hospitals for treatment of hallucinations, and that he suffered from dementia-rooted and organic brain damage. In August 1996, Judge Eugene Nickerson of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York ruled that Giganti was mentally competent to stand trial. He pleaded not guilty and had been free for years on $1 million bail. Giganti had a cardiac operation in December 1996. On June 25, 1997, Giganti's trial started, which he attended in a wheelchair. On July 25th, after almost 3 days of deliberations, the jury convicted Giganti of conspiring in plots to kill other mobsters and of running rackets as head of the Genovese family, but acquitted him of 7 of the most serious counts. Prosecutors stated that the verdict finally established that Giganti was not mentally ill, as his lawyers and relatives had long maintained. On December 18, 1997, Giganti was sentenced to 12 years in prison and fined $1.25 million by Jack Weinstein, the judge, a lenient sentence due to Giganti's age and frailty, who declared that Giganti had been, quote, finally brought to bay in his declining years after decades of vicious criminal tyranny. While in prison, Giganti maintained his role of boss of the Genovese family, while other mobsters entrusted to run his day-to-day activities. Giganti relayed orders to the family through his son, Andrew, who visited him often in prison. On January 23, 2002, Giganti was indicted with several other mobsters, including Andrew, on obstruction of justice charges due to his causing a 7-year delay in his previous trial by feigning insanity. Several days later, Andrew was released on $2.5 million bail. On April 7, 2003, the day the trial began, prosecutor Rosalind Mouskoff had planned to play tapes showing Giganti fully coherent, careful, and intelligent, running criminal operations from prison. But when Giganti pled guilty to obstruction of justice, the judge sentenced him to an additional 3 years in prison. Mouskoff stated, "The jig is up. Vincent Giganti is a cunning faker, and those of us in law enforcement who always knew this was an act, the act ran for decades, but today it's over." On July 25, 2003, Andrew Giganti was sentenced to 2 years in prison and fined $2.5 million for racketeering and extortion. Giganti died on December 19, 2005, at the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. His funeral and burial were held 4 days later, on December 23rd, at St. Anthony of Padua Church in Greenwich Village. After Giganti's death, the leadership of the Genovese family went to Capo Danny the Lion Leo, who was apparently running the day-to-day activities of the family by 2006. That same year, Cirillo was reportedly promoted to consigliere behind bars, and Mangano was released from prison. By 2008, the family administration was believed to be whole again. In March of that year, Leo was sentenced to 5 years in prison for loan sharking and extortion. Former acting consigliere Lawrence Little Larry Dentico was leading the New Jersey faction of the family until convicted of racketeering in 2006. He was released from prison in 2009. In December 2008, Liborio Bellamo was paroled after serving 12 years. What role he plays in the Genovese hierarchy is open to speculation, but he's likely had a major say in the running of the family since its tight parole restrictions had expired. A March 2009 article in the New York Post claimed Leo was still acting boss despite his incarceration. It also estimated that the Genovese family consists of about 270 main members. The family maintains power and influence in New York, New Jersey, Atlantic City, and Florida. It is recognized as the most powerful mafia family in the U.S., a distinction brought about by their continued devotion to secrecy. According to the FBI, many Genovese family associates do not know the names of family leaders or even other associates, making it difficult for investigators to gather intelligence about the family's current status. In 2016, Eugene Rooster Onofrio, who is believed to be a capo largely active in Little Italy and Connecticut, was accused of operating a large multi-million-dollar enterprise that ran bookmaking offices, scammed medical businesses, and smuggled cigarettes and guns. He was also alleged to have run a loan shark operation from Florida and Massachusetts. Other members of his reputed crew pleaded guilty to extortion and other crimes. On October 10, 2018, Ralph Santinello, suspected of being a Genovese acting capo, was sentenced to 5 years in prison for extorting $20,000 from Craig Morrell, the owner of one of the biggest towing and scrap metal companies in Massachusetts, including threatening his life and assaulting him. Morrell managed to negotiate the extortion price from $100,000 to $20,000. Associate Giovanni Johnny Calabrese was sentenced to 3 years in prison. In October 2017, 13 Genovese and Gambino associates and soldiers were sentenced after being indicted following an NYPD operation in December 2016, dubbed Sharkbait. The investigation focused on large-scale illegal gambling and loan sharking ring. Prosecutors claimed 76-year-old Genovese soldier Salvatore De Meo was in charge of the operation and had generated several $1 million from the enterprise. According to the FBI, the Genovese family had not had an official boss since Gigante's death, and the leadership was in a state of limbo for some time. Law enforcement considers Leo to be the acting boss, Mangano, the underboss, and Cirillo, the consigliere. The family is known for placing top capos in leadership positions to help the administration run day-to-day activities. At present, capos Bellamo, Mascarella, and Cirillo and Dentico hold the greatest influence within the family and play major roles in its administration. The Manhattan and Bronx factions, the traditional powers in the family, still exercise that control today. By 2016, however, the FBI considers Bellamo to be the most likely official boss of the Genovese family. On January 10, 2018, 5 members and associates, including Gigante's son, Vincent Esposito, were arrested and charged with racketeering, conspiracy, and several counts of related offenses by the NYPD and FBI. The charges include extortion, labor racketeering conspiracy, fraud, and robbery. Genovese associate and Brooklyn-based United Food and Commercial Workers officer Frank Cañeta was also charged. Union official and associate Vincent Diacunto Jr. was also involved and allegedly acted on behalf of Esposito to pass along threat messages and also collect extortion money from the union, in particular from Vincent Fife, the president of a wine, liquor, and distillery union in Brooklyn. Fife was forced to pay $10,000 per year to keep his $300,000 a year union job, which he obtained through the influence of the Genovese family. The labor union infiltration was alleged to have taken place for at least 16 years. Esposito allegedly extorted several other union officials and an insurance agent. At his home during a warranted search, authorities recovered an unregistered handgun, $3.8 million in cash, brass knuckles, and a handwritten list of mafia members. Esposito was granted bail for almost $10 million on April 2018 and pled not guilty. In April 2019, Esposito pled guilty to conspiring to commit racketeering offenses with members and associates of the Genovese family. He was sentenced in July 2019 to 2 years in prison. On October 13, 2020, an indictment charged soldier Christopher Chirico, along with Colombo family associate Frankie Russo, attorney Jason Kurland, and securities broker Frank Smuckler with conspiracy, wire fraud, and money laundering. The indictment accused the lottery attorney Kurland, along with Russo, Chirico, and Smuckler, with swindling $80 million from jackpot winners in an illegal scheme siphoning money from the jackpot winners' investments. On April 26, 2022, an indictment was served charging capos Nicholas Calisi and Ralph Balsamo, soldiers Michael Messina and John Campanella, and associates Michael Pauly and Thomas Pauly, with racketeering conspiracy involving illegal gambling and extortion. Balsamo was previously arrested on April 12th, and Calisi was detained in Boca Raton, Florida, and presented before a U.S. magistrate judge in the Southern District of Florida. According to the indictment, the defendants operated a criminal racketeering enterprise since at least 2011. On August 16, 2022, acting capo Carmelo Carmine Polito, along with family soldiers, were indicted and charged with racketeering, money laundering, illegal gambling, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The Genovese family and Bonanno family jointly operated several illegal gambling operations while using front businesses in Queens and Long Island to launder illegal profits. The Genovese family members were charged with operating illegal gambling parlors and running an illegal online gambling scheme. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more of our Mafia TV series, please like and subscribe. Until next time, forget about it.